Hello, everybody, and welcome to Calls. This is the 2022 Honda Classic Initial Research Show. Hopefully, you had a successful DFS week, outright wagers. Hopefully, you had some Joaquin Niemann. Last I saw, he was about 65 to 1 before the tournament, so hopefully, you had a big hit there. Weekend for me was not successful. Not as bad as last week, especially in DFS, but still a losing weekend. So, we're going to try to get back on the correct path here after a few good weeks in a row there and stop the losing streak. All statistics tonight are provided by FantasyNational.com. Amazing resource. I say it all the time. Go check them out. It's well worth your investment. It's going to make you a much smarter gambler, a much better DFS player. It's well worth your investment. There's not much more I can say to that. It's the best tool out there. There are links to my social media in the description where I post my betting cards, any interesting research and findings that I see throughout the week and throughout the tournament. And also in the description, there is an email if you want to reach out to me and be a part of some bonus content. This will mainly be bonus videos for my subscribers and my tournament fact sheet where I send my favorite bets and DFS plays and whatnot. I've had some decent calls, I guess you want to call them, and then there's been some real clunkers in there. So, like I said, let's hope that we can get back on the right track this week. And then finally, chat is open. We're live. Send any questions that you have, anything you want to see in the initial research tonight. I want to hear about this past weekend, how you did. Did you have a lot of Neiman? Did you have a lot of Morikawa and such? So jump in there, brag about your successes, make fun of my failure. You know the drill. So without any further ado, let's do our initial research for the 2022 Honda Classic. And we move over here to the tournament fact sheet that is out. And I've been impressed the past 2 or 3 weeks that the tournament fact sheet has been out Sunday night for our show here. So we now go from the West Coast, go all the way to the East Coast, and begin the Florida swing, as they say. We are in Palm Beach Gardens, Florida, for the Honda Classic at PGA National. It is a traditionally very, very difficult course, but of course we'll get into all of that here in a bit. The biggest thing to see, it's actually a rather short par 70. It plays to just over 7,100 yards. The greens are fairly large at 7,000 square feet, a little bit bigger than tour average. But what makes this course so difficult is that there are 15 holes with water in play. It is just a brute of a golf course. Genesis and Riviera generally plays like that, but they had some really, really good conditions. And even if you make a course fast and firm, professionals are going to figure it out and they're going to score. And that's what happened this week, emphasized by Neiman's 63-63 start to the tournament. So at PGA National, we are on all Bermuda. So Bermuda greens, Bermuda fairways, Bermuda overseeded with ryegrass. Generally, it's very short rough and somewhat fast greens. We'll see the conditions in Fantasy National here in a bit. Originally designed by Tom Fazio, its most recent renovation architect Jack Nicklaus in 2018. So in Fantasy National, we'll have some Jack Nicklaus courses to compare against to and see if guys play Jack Nicklaus designs well and such, or at least it might not be the most correlating courses since he was just a renovation architect, not the designer, but still it'll be worth looking at. So again, the big takeaways here, fairly large greens, Bermuda pretty fast if I remember correctly, although we're going to have to go into Fantasy National and confirm that. Short par 70, and you will see it is pretty darn difficult. So let's move on over to Fantasy National. And as I've mentioned, I've been working with some metrics and and whatnot. I mentioned last week that moving forward, I might, try to start going from this calendar year forward, and that probably did me and did you all, down the line some disservice. So I mentioned that I was going to lose to Paul Casey and Rory and Sergio and the like if they played well. They played well. I can accept that as a loss, but when I looked back and included some of the fall stats, they would have been a whole lot higher on my rankings. So in that regard, I feel like I let you all down a little bit, since I tried seeing how the using the data from just the beginning of the calendar year worked, and it didn't. It just didn't. So we'll see if I can get back on the right track here. So what I've got here, this custom date range, this is the Fortinet from this past fall. So generally the 2022 season here, as far as I went back, for example, Sungjae is only the Sanderson Farms, whereas Denny McCarthy will go all the way back to the Fortinet. So I think that's probably going to be one of the better sample sizes, at least for now, until we work our way into March, maybe even early April. So some of these guys like Louis, like Tommy Fleetwood, who's in the field this week, can get at least some amount of rounds to compare off against some of these other guys who have been over here, Tringales, the Cameron Youngs, and whatnot. So with that in mind, we're just going to say the top strokes gained total players since the start of this PGA Tour season, or the last 36 rounds, whatever's the most prevalent here. Sungjae, Denny McCarthy, Mac Hughes, Matthew Wolff, Keith Mitchell, Aaron Wise, Billy Horschel, Cameron Tringale, Cameron Young, and JJ Spawn. And do remember that these numbers do not include this week's Genesis yet. So Cameron Young's going to rise a little bit here. I would imagine Aaron Wise might move up a little bit. I mean, he did make the cut to a pretty poor showing on the weekend. Sungjae had a really bad Saturday and then came back today, Sunday, with a decent round. So some of these numbers will definitely change tomorrow when Fantasy National gets the Genesis in there. But seeing someone like Cameron Young this high already, that just shows how good of a rookie he is and how well he's been playing lately. So pretty good sample there. Hey, Darnell, how's it going? Hopefully you had a better DFS week than I did. I told you all what I would lose to on Wednesday night, and I lost. Paul Casey and Rory and all those guys, they played well, and I lost to them. But if you're just now joining, go back and rewatch the first 10 minutes or so, because I do feel pretty bad that I used data just from the start of this calendar year instead of what I'm doing now, which is the beginning of this tour season. And that was just, I tried it and it was wrong. Did okay, double up. There you go. That's good. Hey, wins are wins. That's, hey, I can't say that. It wasn't as bad as the Waste Management Phoenix Open weekend, but it was pretty bad for me. The only thing that saved me, I did have a good fair share of Neiman. I was pretty high on him. Let's see. Who else was up there in the top 10? I didn't really have any Adam Scott. I mean, it was just one of those weeks where if I had, someone like Neiman, I had a bunch of guys that were middling performers and all that such. So, I mean, it was just one of those weeks. It really was. And then the outright wagers were bombs. Just blew them up. Bleh, don't even ask. But moving back here to Fantasy National, here are your top performers since the start of this PGA Tour season. But before we get too much further into Fantasy National, let's take a look at the course breakdown here at PGA National. And the first thing that struck out to me, I was just kind of going through Green obviously being the easiest 6 holes, red being the toughest 6 holes, and then yellow being in the middle. I just happened to kind of go through and glance at some of these rankings and scores and averages and all that stuff. You'll notice that the 14th most difficult hole is averaging exactly par. So generally, if a course is straight average, you would want like 9 and 10 to be average. 14 is when I say 9 to 10 average, 9 to 10 being exactly par. That's not the case here. The 13th is only 3/100ths of a shot under par. This speaks to the incredible difficulty here at PGA National, with the most difficult hole almost a half stroke over par, second and third right at a quarter of a stroke over par. Brutal course, and again, like lots and lots of water. Now the 2 par 5s, since this is par 70, the 2 par 5s do yield an eagle rate higher than you would think for a difficult course, but it's all about scrambling your pars and maybe finding a birdie every once in a while, as often as I have a good week, something like that. So there's a look at the scorecard. You've got, even though it's a short course, about 7,100 yards, there is some length here, and it's mainly in the par 3s. It's what makes this course so difficult. You've got one that's above 225 yards. You've got one at 217 on the scorecard. The 2 on the back 9 are not as long, but completely protected by water, big bunkers and such. So it's going to be a true test of metal, and if I were there, it'd be I don't think I can count as high as I would shoot. It would be bad. So there's a look at the course by the scorecard. Strokes gained by shot type. No surprise probably when you're starting to get into some really tough courses. Strokes gained approach above 1, slightly above 1, and then putting at about 9/10 with off the tee and around the green in that order to finish it out. And those for the top 10 finishers. Let's check the top 5s. You start to see a little bit more of disparity here for the approach. Putting does rise, but still approach is the one that's gaining the most. Off the tee does rise, and then your winners, you can see how much approach matters. It's just much more important. Then we move to strokes gained by hole by par, and this is one of the few courses that kind of mitigate the par 5s. It's not to say they're not important, but clearly they are the least important here at the Honda. As I mentioned, these long par 3s are the most difficult. Here's the proof. If you can salvage your way through the par 3s here, you're going to be doing pretty well. So definitely going to take a look, especially in the data dive, but mainly in the data dive. But we'll take a look tonight and see how much these par 3s contribute to leaderboard success and whatnot. But that's what I can tell you, because generally these bars are reversed. Usually it's 5s and then 4s and then 3s. You've got to hold on the par 3s. You've got to make birdies on the par 5s here at this course, because you're going to struggle for pars a lot of other places. Hole composition, and again, this will be where the data dive show will really help, because there's not a lot of plurality here at this course. You see 4 par 4s at 400 to 450, 4 of them at 450 to 500, so there's not a dominant length that we can focus on, so we're going to have to depend on leaderboard success or prior leaderboard success. You've got 3 that are fairly short by PGA Tour terms. One long one. The 2 par 5s, different lengths. The par 3s, you've got 2 really long ones and 2 middling lengths. P, Gooch and Hoagie got you good. Yeah, Hoagie got me pretty good. I mentioned Wednesday that I would be riding the hot hand of Hoagie until he cooled off. Well, he cooled off real quick, and I lost. Real strong 5s to 6. Of course. That's what we're here for, the data breakdowns. I'm glad that you've come back after the 2 disaster weeks that I've had, because it's not been good. Now, this past weekend wasn't a complete failure, because waste management, I did really, really poorly. This weekend wasn't too bad. I was really high on Neiman, so that helped quite a bit. But it was one of those weekends where if I had Neiman, I paired him with guys that made the cut and then didn't make much of a move. Those were the 6 of 6 lineups. I didn't have him with the Morikawa. I didn't have him with Scott and all these other guys. And, I mentioned also last week, if Rory played well, if Sergio played well, Paul Casey, I was going to lose. And they played well, and I lost. But coming back to PJ National here, so we're definitely going to have to look at prior leaderboard success to figure out if any of these links, if any, they might not, are true determinants of leaderboard success, because there's not a real plurality here. Approach shot distribution, and this is a part of what I was apologizing for, is that when I went back, seeing the Genesis having so many approach shots come from, I believe, is 150 to 175. I should have put that in the model and considered it a whole lot more, especially since guys were just going to be hitting the majority of their shots from there. And I think honestly I went too much into the data and looked into it too much and all that stuff. So back to basics a little bit this week, I think, is the best way to put it. So we'll see that 175 to 200 is so much more of a common shot here than the PGA Tour that we're going to look at this quite a bit. Now, how much it'll factor into the main data model, we'll see. But it would be hard to put anything less than 5% in this, just because the amount of approach shots that come from here. And then, the leaderboard success will probably dictate how much I put into there. But like I said, Pete, if you joined, just now or a little bit late, I really do apologize. Like the past 2 weeks, and especially last week, I had been using the beginning of the data since 1/1/22. I felt like there were enough rounds to evaluate guys, and when I looked back and included some of the fall rounds, especially for guys like Paul Casey and Sergio and those guys, they would have been a lot higher in my data model. So I felt pretty bad about that, and I was okay with me losing to that. But if you all took that advice as well, that's where I felt pretty bad. So until we get into, say, March, maybe even early April, I'm going to use the Fortinet of this past fall be kind of like the starting metric, especially for guys like Tommy Fleetwood, who's in the field this week. He's got 8 rounds since the beginning of the tour season. Is it perfect? No. But it's better than what I did last week, where I had 0 rounds for Rory and Sergio and Paul Casey because they hadn't played over here. So it's better than nothing. So that's the spiel of my apology and what I'm doing moving forward until I feel like there's enough rounds. But there's the approach shot distribution. We'll look at 175 to 200 a lot, just because of the amount of approach shots that come from here. Historic cut line. This will speak to the difficulty of PGA National. Last year was one of the lower cut lines, as in one of the cut lines that the guys played well. It was +2. Year before that, +5. It's been as high as +7 in 2011. So, this course is not easy. There is definitely going to be an emphasis on difficult courses. I thought Riviera was going to play difficult. Ended up playing pretty average, just because they had such great weather conditions. And these guys are pros. If you no matter how fast and firm you make it, these guys are pros. They're going to figure it out. The difference with this course is there's a ton of water. 15 holes that have water come into play. So I feel really confident in putting some emphasis on difficulty this week. Scoring distribution around the par, you see already from the start you got more bogeys than birdies, and then a fairly healthy doubles bar here, and then eagles is non-existent. But the water can come up and bite you and get some doubles. So again, just difficult course. Driving accuracy low. Guys will try to find fairways and still hit rough and water. So generally speaking, if you think accuracy is low, you would expect driving distance to be high and vice versa. Well, driving accuracy low, distance a lot lower. So that speaks to the fact that guys have to club down. This is a strategic golf course. Jack Nicklaus design. You think about that like with Pete Dye. It's the same kind of concept here. Lots of fairway metals and irons off the tee for position, and then you still have to hit a very good iron shot. So accuracy low, green and regulation percentage very low compared to the tour average, and this is with greens large in comparison to the average tour event. Average tour green is 6,000 square feet. These are 7,000. So very, very, very low green and regulation percentage. And scrambling is lower here. Just it's tough. It's tough. You can see single round scores. If a par is 70, you have the majority at 70 and 71. A fairly healthy amount at 72. Speaking to the +2 cut line last year, +3, +4, what it normally is. 3 putts per round now are lower than the tour event. So lag putting, like the Genesis, won't be as important. We saw how much 3-putt avoidance was pretty common this weekend, depending on how much coverage you were able to see with all with the very fast greens. I'd be surprised if they weren't lightning this past week. But just due to the breaks and undulations in the greens, fast and firm, I imagine 3-putts were pretty common this week. We spoke to the distance, a lot lower here. Green and regulation proximity. So this is where it kind of comes into play. Even though the green is a lot tougher to hit, guys who are hitting the green are generally closer to the hole, even with larger greens. So there is the emphasis on proximity and iron play. It just speaks to what we saw a bit earlier with the strokes gained approach, and as we went up the leaderboard, top 10s to top 5s to winners, just how much approach distanced itself from putting off the tee and whatnot. So there is PGA National from a graphical view, graphical scorecard view and whatnot. Historic conditions, you can see here, and generally, like the Genesis was, difficult to average. That's not the case here. It is all difficult. You have to come down to 2017 before you find a round that was average. It is always difficult here. The greens have always been Bermuda. The one good thing, though, generally these greens are receptive, or at least much more receptive than Riviera was, for example. Hitting the fairways has generally been average, but on the more difficult end of average compared to the PGA Tour. And as I mentioned when we went through the tournament fact sheet, the rough is short here. It can be playable out of if you're not finding the water. But the green speeds, here you go. I didn't know if they were average or fast. I imagine they were fast. They're actually fast and lightning. So we're definitely going to be looking at fast Bermuda, some lightning Bermuda. But the course generally plays short. Now in 2019, they decided to go a little ham and really fuck the players over. But generally speaking, it's a short course. It can stretch to 7,200 if they put all the tees back one day or whatnot. But generally measures to about 7,125. So those are the tournament conditions at Honda. Always difficult. Fast and lightning Bermuda greens, short rough, generally receptive greens in between firm and medium. So, and then finally, let's take a look at some tournament history here. The guys who have played this event the best. You've got Lucas Glover over the past 5 years being your top strokes gained player. He is 4 for 5 making the cut. He did miss it in 2020, but his 4 cuts made are all top 25s, 3 of those being top 20s, one of them being a top 5. So he generally plays this course pretty well. The aforementioned Tommy Fleetwood, he's only played it twice, but both of those are top 5 finishes. Sungjae, your winner in 2020, he's 3 for 3. Your defending champion, Matt Jones, has played this course well in the past. Let's see, your runner-up last year, Brandon Hagee, 3 for 4. He does have a missed cut, but 2 top 25s and a solo second. So there's a look at the guys that generally play this course well. No surprise, probably. You see the Johnny Vegas's off the tee being so important. CT Pan likes short courses. Course doesn't require length, so Duffner, Billy Horschel. Anytime Bermuda greens are in play, you want to look at Billy Horschel. So yeah, there's a look at some of the players that play this event well. Gary Woodland. Anytime you have a club down course. When Gary Woodland won the the U.S. Open, I believe it was, at Pebble Beach. Pebble Beach, a club down course, Gary Woodland wins. So anytime it's a club down course, you got to look at Gary Woodland as well. So let's look at the other end of the spectrum. These are guys that, for whatever reason, don't play this course well. The first name that kind of jumped out to me was Hank Lebioda, 1 for 3 with a 70th. Robert Strebe, 1 for 5. The one being a top 15 last year. Camilo Villegas, he is 2 for 4 with a top 10 last year, but a clunker, and then looks like 2 really bad events. Brian Stewart, 3 for 5, but nothing astronomical, just 1 top 20. Let's see here, what else do we have? Hayden Buckley, who's been playing pretty well this PGA Tour season. He's 1 for 1, but solo 69th. There's Hunter Extenson. He's playing this event this year. He's 0 for 1 the one time he played it. I did not mean to click on him. Well, let's see. Where were we? Hunter Extenson. Russell Knox. Russell Knox has been playing pretty well lately. He struggles at this course. Doug Gim. So there's a look at some of the guys that seemingly play well and struggle here at PGA National. So let's look into a few metrics here in Fantasy National. We might go to the leaderboard, at least last year's leaderboard, a little bit. But now that we have some data, some info here for the Honda, first thing we always do, and again, this is set for the beginning of the PGA Tour season. So we're going to put Bermuda. And we're definitely going to put fast Bermuda. I'm going to add lightning just in case. I don't think there's too many rounds that will affect. So 9, Russell Knox is the most for fast Bermuda. Okay, so it actually added some for lightning. So Russell Knox, he went up to 13. So I imagine the Sanderson Farms can be lightning. The RSM can get to lightning. So whatever reason, it added 4 rounds, so the more data, the better. So since the beginning of this tour season, 2021-2022 tour season, your top 10 strokes gained putters on fast and lightning Bermuda greens: Brian Gay, Mackenzie Hughes, Zach Johnson, Nick Watney, Brendan Todd, Alex Noren, Brooks, Landry, Roger Sloan, and Matthias Schwab. Interesting stuff there. And if I did not want to keep this filter, I would check that against, say the last 36 rounds in total. But I definitely want to keep this filter at least for tonight, and then we can move to a broader perspective in the Data Dive show. But for tonight's initial research, I'm going to keep this as much as I can. So there's a look at your recent form fast and lightning Bermuda putters. Let's take those. Apparently we're going to add POA because I can't click where I want to. Let's just look at strokes gained approach. We saw how important it was going to be this week, at least graphically. So your top strokes gained approach players since the beginning of this tour season. You've got Russell Knox, speaking to how well he's been playing. Russell Knox, Hudson Swafford, Mito Pereira, Daniel Berger, Austin Smotherman, Doug Gim, Lucas Glover, Chris Stroud, Matthew Neesmith, and Aaron Rye. Ryan Palmer just outside the top 10. And that was another reason why I struggled this week. I was really high on Ryan Palmer. I thought he was a pretty good value. And when you go +8, you're not any value. I don't care if you're minimum priced. And Ryan Palmer wasn't minimum priced. So that also killed me this week. But there's your top strokes gained approach players, just in general. Staying with strokes gained approach, I'm going to add the difficult metric here. And I always forget it's all the way at the top. So strokes gained relative to par, difficult. Now let's take a look at the strokes gained approach. And again, it's only 11 rounds. So it's stretching back to the Zozo. You had a Bermuda, Houston's. So there's your difficult rounds so far on this season's PGA Tour. Strokes gained approach, with strokes gained approach on difficult rounds. Aaron Rye, so he's now top 10 in both. Russell Knox, top 10 in both. Ryan Palmer, he was third here. He was just outside the top 10 with no filter. Nick Watney, Daniel Berger, Burgoon, Smotherman, Mackenzie Hughes, Alex Smalley, and Chad Ramey are your top 10. There's Swafford. I just remember Bezadenhout just outside the top 10 because his name is a bajillion miles long. So staying with strokes gained or difficult relative to par, let's move to strokes gained total. Let's just see who plays the best on difficult courses. So your top strokes gained total players on difficult courses this PGA Tour season so far. Tringali, Denny McCarthy, Aaron Rye, Chad Ramey, Patrick Rogers, Russell Knox, Charles Howell III, Sung Jae, Adam Shank, and Mackenzie Hughes. So a lot of overlap here. Again, not too many rounds that have played difficult. So this is one where I might need to either eliminate the beginning of this filter or something. Like Lucas Herbert only has 2 rounds. I don't feel terribly confident using only 2 rounds. Tommy Fleetwood 3. Some of these guys only have 1. So that'll be something for the data dive. We can expand this or just remove it and just get guys' last 36 rounds total. So there's a look at some of the umbrella stats. Let's move into the leaderboard, at least from last year. Figure out some of these things that kind of played and whatnot. You can see here, off the tee, it mattered a little bit. You had Chase Seifert. He was -1 off the tee, but you have to come down here into the tied for 13s before you find a whole lot more, and they're still slightly negative. So off the tee looks like it can matter. Let's take a look at that. And again, not the strongest correlation, but it's not nothing. You've got a bunch of your cut makers, your middling finishes here. Joaquin Niemann, Will Gordon, 2 middlings. I mean, actually, Niemann was the top 25. Hagee, always pretty good off the tee. He's long off the tee. It's a matter if he's hitting his fairways, and yet last season he played it pretty well. So he either clubbed down or was extremely accurate, one of the two. Keegan, Varner. So I mean, you have some decent correlation here. Nothing extremely high, but like I said, you got your cut makers. Some pretty middling finishes, some high finishes. VJ missed the cut, but he's 14th, 15th ish down. So Off the tee looks fairly important, but here's some real strong correlation here. Top 20, third, to be fair, clunker, 13th, 19th, middling, first. So a lot stronger, at least at the top. You do have 2 miscuts here, but you see Lee Biota, who generally doesn't play this course very well at all anyway. He was up there, didn't do a fuck thing else. He couldn't make a putt. Nick Taylor couldn't do anything else that week. So, maybe take these two with a little bit of grain of salt, but you see the higher finishes up in here. Strokes gained around the green. Kind of like off the tee. Somewhat strong. You got the clunker here from Ricky. Clunker here from Scott Harrington. Some high finishes. And then the putting. Yeah. A difficult course like this, if you're going to putt well that week, you're going to win or generally do a lot better. You got the middling finish here from Nate Lashley. A lot of upper leaderboard success. So if you look at it from just a leaderboard perspective, you see here approach. While you do have one really bad one from Sungjae, you also have some really high numbers. 6, 8, 3.7, 4, 3, 5, 4. Some high numbers. Whereas, around the green, not as high numbers. And then the putting are really, really high. So putting last year looked like it was really, really important. We can check that once we get to Microsoft Excel from a portion of the show. Let's check distance and fairways here. You see Brandon Hagee. So he actually wasn't laying up too much. Second in distance and finished second. So interesting to see there. Fairways. You see how important fairways are. You got to come all the way down to Bramlett here for a miscut. Let's see. Yeah, fairways gained. So metric we probably want to look at. Good drives, which is, a combination of fairways and greens. So if one of these two isn't dominant, I'll go to good drives, generally speaking. But it looks like fairways might be more important than greens, which is weird to say, but at least in 2021, that's what the data is looking at here. Let's see. Move through birdies and bogeys, and kind of what you would expect. You do have Matt Jones here, more birdies than bogeys, but generally you got higher numbers. Again, in general, there will be exceptions. Higher numbers over here at the bogeys avoided, and the ones that are negative are less than the birdies and less often. So bogeys avoided will be one of the metrics that I really, really look at this week. On a very difficult course, doubles, maybe. I mean, that's generally how it looks, though, when you're avoiding doubles. Let's see. We move through here. I want to see par threes. This was supposedly the most important strokes gained by hole by par. Okay. So you had Ventura, who did not play well at all, but then you had a real big run of high leaderboard success here. A top 20 followed by, top 20, middling, strong finishes. So looks like top 3 par threes were fairly important. Is there any length here that maybe stands out? Maybe 175 to 200. Maybe we could look at that in Microsoft Excel. Again, Ventura played the par threes well, just apparently didn't have a good week. Same with Donald. Interesting. I want to look at proximity. So even though the proximity to the hole was shorter than the average tour event, didn't look like a big deal last year. And again, in the data dive, we'll go back a few years, especially we'll take in the full 5 years since this course has been at PGA National as long as I can remember. The difference between this week and the Genesis last week, the Genesis turned into an invitational in 2020. So we heavily emphasized 2020 and 2021 versus the full 5-year sample. This week we're just definitely going to be using the full 5-year sample. I mean, again, proximity I mean, these are your cut makers. Nothing extremely high. I mean, you do have, Michael Thompson, top 20 last year, top 15 and top 20, but these are generally your cut makers. Is there any proximity that looks to be most important? Again, the majority of the approach shots come from 175 to 200, but if it isn't a high contributor to leaderboard success, do we really want to focus on it? I don't know. Again, these are your cut makers, but I don't see anything terribly high. You have a couple of missed cuts in here too, so I don't know. What do you guys think? I wanted to go back to basics and maybe focus on it, because since the majority of approach shots come from here, but leaderboard doesn't say that it's warranted, at least from last year. Now maybe years prior, maybe it factors in more heavily, but I don't see it here. So either in chat or in the comments, let me know what you think. Does 1 year make you shy away from the proximity that's so prevalent here at PGA National, or are you waiting to see in the data dive tomorrow? So that's a look at Fantasy National. I'll do one more for y'all. Let's look at par threes here. So and I'll take the difficult filter off. So since the start of this PGA Tour season, your best strokes gained par 3 players: David Lipsky, Bo Hostler, Dylan Wu, Russell Knox, Patrick Rogers, Matthew Wolff, Aaron Wise, Billy Horschel, Mac Hughes, and Stefan Jaeger. So there's your top par 3 players so far this PGA Tour season. And again, tomorrow I'll emphasize we'll take some of this filter off when needed and get a fuller, broader view. But I wanted to make sure I had it on for tonight's show. Let's move over to Microsoft Excel. And pardon me while I get set up here and switch views. So, hey Josh, how you doing? Hopefully your DFS was better than mine. Some mixed reviews in chat. Did well in a double up and such, and that was Darnell, and then P was kind of like me. Gooch let me down. Hoagie let me down. It wasn't the disaster of the week that the Phoenix was, but it was definitely a losing week for me. Fortunately, I had some Neiman. I was really high on Joaquin Neiman, so he kind of saved some of the lineups. But the ones where I had 6 of 6, it was Neiman, and I'm just going to throw out a name, guys like Aaron Wise, who made the cut. Played too much ROM. Yeah, his putting has been, I don't even think I want to say it's been bad. I think he's been a little unfortunate. Now, the strokes gained metrics will say it's been bad. I think that's more, honestly, a lack of his approach game being so elite that he's leaving himself these further putts. That would be my take on it. Yes, he hasn't been making putts, so the numbers won't be as good, but I think there is more of an underlying issue, if you will, in that his proximity or his strokes gained approach haven't been as world-beating as it can be. That's my take on it. Another one good thing that I did, I avoided the Patrick Rogers chalk. I just had bad vibes, bad juju coming from him, and he did not play well, so that's another part that saved me. So we're looking here at the course data detail, and just remember, the lower the number, generally speaking, the more correlating success a statistic has. So in the umbrella stats, of course, you've got the approach, which we saw graphically, very, very important, putting, then tee, and then around the green. But you see here, like strokes gained putting, you saw that it was pretty darn important last year, and it's kind of playing out where stroke gained putting was more important than the approach, but the most important thing last year was off the tee. maybe it's a great insight. I mean, that's just what I'm seeing from the coverage that I'm seeing. Like, I invest in PGA Tour Live, so I see much more than just what CBS's shitty coverage shows. Like I said, is he not making the putts? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, some of these putts he can make. He's John Rahm. But I would imagine his proximity and his strokes gained approach numbers are below average by his standards lately, and that's why it appears the putting is faltering. But we kind of saw this in the leaderboard last year where the tee was the most important. That is generally not the case here. But it was last year, and that gives me a little bit of comfort. Yeah, he salvaged pretty good. He had a great Sunday. He played well today to, I think, did he squeeze into the top 25? I feel like he tied for 21st with his -5 or -6. But this gives me a whole lot better, feeling, a lot better confidence, seeing what the numbers said last year in that the, off the tee was most important. That's what we saw on the leaderboard. But generally speaking, strokes gained approach, then putting, off the tee, and then around the green. We'll move over to the next tab in Fantasy National, which is fairways and greens and such. T21, I'm glad that my memory serves correctly. It was a good Sunday for him. Came back to normal ROM standards for a day. Next tab here in Fantasy National, we've got only bogey-free round at the tourney. Nice. At his price, you did need a win at in the GPPs. You're correct. You are correct. Let's see. What was the optimal lineup was something probably like Neiman, Morikawa, Adam Scott, CT Pan was up there. So if you avoided Dustin Johnson, which I didn't, that hurt. If you avoided Patrick Rogers, which I did, again, I had mixed results generally on the bad side as opposed to the good. But let's see here. We move to this tab. Greens looks like it's going to be the most important, and then followed by good drives, which is interesting because we saw how important fairways were last year on the leaderboard. Look how much of an outlier that is. A 36 here is almost, 2/3 more important than the rest of the 4 years. This is really bringing this number down. This could be as much as maybe 60 or so. So good to know that that's seems to be an outlier, and we'll confirm that tomorrow in the Data Dive show. Good drives looks like it's a bit of an outlier as well. So looks like there's not too much terribly important here. Maybe greens, but you can say that for almost any tournament. So not sure how much is going to play from this tab in Fantasy National. Eagles, birdies, bogeys, Morikawa, Hovland, Scott, Neiman, Mav, Cam Young, perfect, 49,700. All right, good stuff. Thanks, P. Yeah, I always wonder what the optimal lineups are because once kind of Sunday hits, I stop unless I have an outright wager or my DFS teams have a chance at a high finish. I kind of check out and start doing the next week's stuff for the show, so I kind of tune out. Good stuff. I appreciate you posting that, P. Morikawa, Hovland he had a fairly bad Sunday, but he had a great tournament, to be fair. Scott, Neiman, McNeely, McNeely. I was low on McNeely. Didn't have him rated well, and he played well. 679 points. Whew. Boy, if I could count that high, I'd be a happy man, let alone pick people that could get that many points. So, we see here, like we saw last year, birdies were actually more important last year than bogeys, but overall, bogeys are more important than the birdies. Move around here. Don't want to spend too much time on this since it's so data heavy, but it said strokes gained par 3 versus par 4 versus par 5. Well, If you've been following me anytime, you know that I think strokes gained par 4 is the most important metric in PGA Tour golf. I'm a firm believer in that. So it's going to be lower than the par 3s, but this is a pretty low number, to be fair, for strokes gained par 3s, and you see just how much the par 5s are mitigated. I mean, this is a pretty darn high number. Like, for example, next week at the Arnold Palmer, it's a 31.5 versus 48.5. And again, just a reminder, the lower the number, the more correlating it is to high leaderboard success. The last thing I want to do, and I'm only doing it because of the prevalence of approach shots that come from this range, 175 to 200, last year didn't have a lot of correlation. Now, the year before that, it looked like it had quite a bit by proximity standards. It looks like 125 to 150 would be the most, correlating. Now, you do have one, I would say, negative outlier in the sense that if you remove this, the number goes up. That's what I'm seeing there. I don't see much here that would say you need to focus on 175 to 200. But then again, it's 8% more prevalent than the average tour event to have an approach shot come from this range. So I'd be interested to hear your take on it. Is that something that you factor in when you see Fantasy National? If you see so many approach shots come from a certain range, do you put any value in it? Or is that more a product of how guys play the holes? So again, put it in the comments. I kind of want to hear your all's take on it. But the last thing I'm going to check in Microsoft Excel, and I don't have it up, and I apologize. Let me bring that up really quickly, is the previous tournament success and performance here at the Honda. So, and this is just a kind of a different way to look at the prior course or prior tournament history tab in Fantasy National. I've just went ahead and broken out the stats as opposed to giving you the strokes gained total like Fantasy National does. So you see here, sorted by average finish, Tommy Fleetwood played it twice, averages a top 5 finish. He has done Tommy Fleetwood things. He's best known for his strokes gained approach. It just hasn't translated over here in the States. Apologies if you can hear the ice. I'm just trying to prevent myself from having a coughing fit. But strokes gained approach, teeing around the green game has been pretty darn good. Fairways and good drives. So there's Tommy. Again, take it. I wouldn't throw it out. A lot of times I'll emphasize when a guy has only one start, but only having 2 starts isn't, something to, put all your chips in, to use a poker term. Now, Gary Woodland, 4 for 4 with a top 25 finish. And again, emphasis on the past 5 years. That's all I go back is 5 years. That's why I was so high on DJ, because the last time he missed the cut, and the only other time he missed the cut was back in, 2011, 2013. And when I picked him, this is the cut. But like I said, here's Gary Woodland playing it really well. Approach, strong. Off the tee, strong. Actually is positive in distance. Interesting to note. You got Aaron Wise, 3 for 3, top 30 finish. Matt Jones, your defending champion, 3 for 3 with an average of 28. So if you've got a win and you're still averaging 28th, you probably have some pretty middling performances to go with it. But you can't argue 3 for 3, no miscuts. Let's see here. Johnny Vegas, 5 for 5 with an average of top 30. Good stuff there. Nick Watney, there's a name. 4 for 4 with an average of top 31. Ryan Palmer. I might be the jaded ex-lover on Ryan Palmer this week. Boy, I had him quite a few times. He did not perform well for me. Jason Duffner, 5 for 5, top 40. Let's see, at the bottom end of the spectrum, probably see the same names that we saw. Henrik Stenson, he's only played it once. We saw Podrick, 0 for 4. Lee Biota was 1 for 3, like we saw. Lee Biota was on a heater with his putter. Not here. I just realized you can look at the live tourneys even if you don't enter them. Yeah. Now, they're not necessarily closed, but, all the holes have been played, 0 minutes remaining, or player holes remaining, whatever the DraftKings term is. It's always good to look into it. Again, like I said, I'm not trying to ignore it, but that's something I just don't do because I'm trying to get prepared for the Sunday show. Is that I usually don't even see what the optimal lineup is. So again, P, I appreciate you finding that and putting that in the chat. It's always good to know. So there's a look at the guys that generally don't play it well. Again, Russell Knox, which is surprising. He's been playing really well. Only 1 for 5. Now his approach has been good, so he just can't make a putt here, I guess. I'll just do a couple stats here. I'll look at par 3s since they seem to be so very important here. There's Tommy Fleetwood playing them extremely well. Aaron Wise playing them well. Chase Koepka. He's only played it once, but he did finish 30th. The last time I used Chase Koepka was in the fall. I distinctly remember that at the minimum at 6,000, throwing him in a couple lineups, you can't do any worse. We'll see the results of that at the end of the PGA Tour season when I review, the good calls and bad calls. We'll revisit how that went. PGA needs to at least record every golfer's shot, then offer condensed rounds for people to watch. Yeah, having a subscription to PGA Tour Live, since my job is kind of predicated on it, they do have 4 feeds that does okay. I would suggest you mute it. Some of the commentary I'm not impressed with. I'm not a sportscaster, so I can't say that they're doing bad. It's just I'll put music on and just kind of watch golf on 4 different live feeds. Is where I find the perfect lineup. Cool, good stuff. Okay, thanks again for putting that in the chat. I'll have to check it out. I have never seen that. Line Star app. Okay. Trying to get a gauge here again. The guys that play the par 3s well. Sepp Straka, Bo Hostler, Daniel Berger. One more, and again, just because I keep harping on it and wanting your all's opinion, 175 to 200, since most of the approach shots come from here. Like Tommy Fleetwood is not good from, I shouldn't say not good, he's average from that range, and yet he's average of top 5. It's good. What else it is good for? Hey, if it's good for something, it's providing value. I'm questioning what I'm providing the past couple of weeks. Maybe comedic relief. If I'm providing something, hey. The guys that have played it well, hey, look, Aaron Wise is good from that proximity, but like Chase Koepka wasn't. Sam Ryder was. Shane Lowry was. Jason Duffner wasn't, and yet he's 5 for 5. So again, everything that I am seeing is that the specific proximity doesn't need to be focused on, but yet there's so many approach shots that come from there. Is that something? So I'll go ahead and put this all the way back to the umbrella stats for you all if you all want to end the show or pause the show and take some notes on that. But guys, again, appreciate the interaction here, especially P finding the optimal lineup. Darnell and Josh, thanks for joining again as you all always do. I enjoy the interaction and the banter, and on weeks like this and the Phoenix where I'm 0 for 2 and taking a beating, you can throw some shade my way. I can roll with it because I'll be the first one to say I was wrong. Hopefully your all's DFS went better than mine this weekend. We'll get back on the right track this week for the Honda. For all the contests that you entered this past weekend, for all the wagers that you're thinking about making early on here at the Honda. And until I see you tomorrow night for the Data Dive show, may all your bets be profitable.